Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout 3, where today we're going to be taking a look at some problematic weapons. So today we're going to be taking a look at the combat shotgun, its unique variant, and the double barrel shotgun. The double barrel probably should have been included with the sawed-off versions of the shotgun, because it would make the most sense to go there, because I don't think it really needs its own video, so it's going to be lumped into this one, but it should have probably went with the sawed-off shotguns. So the combat shotgun, you can get pretty early on. The combat shotgun, you can actually get right at the very start if you know where to go. It's also not very uncommon for raiders to be carrying around combat shotguns, so finding multiple of these is not very difficult in the early and mid game, and that's kind of an issue. So for the stats of the combat shotgun, this one does 55 damage per shot, which is pretty good. That is only a little bit better than the sawed-off shotgun, but this one does have better spread, so it's a little bit more consistent than that. This one does 83 damage per second, and that's pretty good because this does have a 12-round magazine. How it feeds with that, I don't know. The combat shotgun in Fallout 3 is a bit weird because it's based off of a PPSH-41 submachine gun, but then it's a 12-gauge shotgun, so very odd design choice that they chose to make. This one has a 1x crit modifier, which is fine. However, this one does do 243 crit damage, which is kind of an issue because with how early on you can get this, just a regular combat shotgun can easily carry you through the entire game, even on the highest difficulty in Fallout 3. Even more so if you're going with a crit build, which you might as well go for because that's pretty much the strongest build in Fallout 3. This one costs 27 action points to use in VATS, which isn't too much. This one has 3 spread, which I think makes it the most accurate of any of the shotguns. Not any of the shotgun type weapons, because I think the Metal Blaster is the most accurate, but this one is still reasonably accurate. This one has a magazine of 12, this one weighs 7, and this one can fire 145 shots before it breaks. This is really good, and this is kind of one of the issues with the combat shotgun and just shotguns in general in Fallout 3, where even something like a common combat shotgun generally outperforms most weapons in the game. This will beat out pretty much everything at close range besides other shotgun style weapons, like the unique version of this, the double barrel, which we're going to talk about, and then the other shotgun weapons like the Metal Blaster or Paulson's revolver. There's not really anything else that can compete with them at close range or even at medium range for that matter, or really at long range if you want to include the Metal Blaster in that. So for the pros of this weapon, really high damage and really high damage per second. Kind of absurd amounts. Then you've also got the common ammo. 12 gauge is not very hard to find, and there's no other shotgun shells, so if you find any shotgun shells, it's going to load into this, and these are really common. So finding them early on, finding them throughout the game, and having your shotgun fixed up is not going to be that much of an issue. The only real con to this is that it has short range, and that's about it. If it had long range, there wouldn't be any cons to it. This is pretty much one of the best early game weapons, and pretty much one of the best weapons in the game. So for an overall rating for the combat shotgun, it's actually going to go up into the broken tier because of how easy these are to get. And that is kind of an issue overall. It's kind of a bit much. They did balance shotguns better later on into like Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 4, even though in New Vegas you could also argue something like the Riot shotgun is pretty broken too. Let's talk about the unique version now, which is even stronger than the regular one. This is the terrible shotgun. You do have to get this one, and it's kind of out of your way since you have to go pretty far to the west. You find just a giant raider base there, and you do have to fight your way all the way through it to get to the terrible shotgun. So the terrible shotgun does 80 damage per shot, which is very high. This does 120 damage per second, which is also really good. Still has a 1x crit modifier. This one has even more crit damage at 360 crit damage. This one costs 27 action points to use in VATS. This one is a lot less accurate than a regular combat shotgun at 6 spread, so it's actually got some of the most spread out of any of the shotguns, meaning that this one's not as good at longer ranges, but it's even kind of better at close range because it's just more likely to hit, and if you hit a crit, you're probably going to kill stuff. And this one holds 12 rounds in it. This one is heavier too at 10 weight, and this one you can fire 146 shots before it breaks. This one is also going to go up into our broken tier. This one is just a stronger version of the combat shotgun that sort of just does its job better, at least at close range. At medium range, you could argue that they're about the same, and at longer range, it's going to be worse. But at that point, you could just substitute this with like the Metal Blaster if you want something that's better at long range. This is also a pretty overpowered weapon. It's not very difficult to get if you just want to rush to that area and you just want to take a combat shotgun there. You're probably going to have fun just killing all the raiders there. There's also one of the super mutant behemoths there. It would also make later appearances in some of the other Fallout games, like it's in Fallout 4 as well. although it does have its French name there rather than its English name, so that's kind of funny. And then we move on to the double barrel shotgun, the full-size double barrel shotgun, not the sawed-off, that you get in Point Lookout. This can be held by the tribals and by the hillbillies. You can also buy these pretty early on at the shop right as you get to Point Lookout, so that's pretty nice. They're not too expensive, but you do need specifically these to fix them up. You can't fix them up with the sawed-off shotguns, so it can be a little bit awkward once you do need to fix them up. And this one is unique in a couple different ways. So this one does the highest amount of damage out of any of the shotguns, doing 85 damage per shot, which is pretty high, as well as it does 191 damage per second. That's not necessarily the highest amount of damage per second, because this one does fire out both barrels every time that you pull the trigger, meaning that you're going to have to be reloading it after every single shot, which I think does make this one more balanced than the combat shotgun, since with the combat shotgun, if you miss, it doesn't really matter. You still have 11 more shots that you can fire at it. With this, if you miss, it does matter because you're going to have to reload. And that can be kind of a bad thing, especially if you're fighting in Point Lookout, where the tribals and the hillbillies can also have this weapon and do really high damage back to you. This one also has 1x crit modifier, so it can hit crits, which makes it really strong. This one does 270 crit damage. However, this is more pellets, so you can hit harder than this. I believe this is just counting the blast of one barrel, not counting both barrels. And this is probably the strongest sneak weapon in the game, which is kind of weird that a double barrel is the strongest sneaking weapon. But if you hit a sneak crit with this, then that doubles your damage even more. So this one is really, really strong for that. You can one-shot, I think, everything in the game with this. This one costs 35 action points to use in VATS, which is a bit more. This one does have 5 spreads, so it's not the most accurate, which is kind of weird. You think that the long barrel, double barrel would have the best spread out of any of the shotguns, but it's actually not. It's one of the worst ones, which is weird. This one does hold 2 rounds in it. However, it fires out just one blast, so you get both barrels being fired at the same time. So you do go through shells potentially twice as fast. This one weighs 6 weight, which isn't too heavy. And this one has 118 shots fired through it. This is individual trigger pulls, not actually the amount of shells. The amount of shells would be doubled from this, since you're firing out 2 shots every time that you shoot it. So it can break kind of fast. This one, I think, is a little bit more balanced than the other shotguns. It's a little bit more balanced than the combat shotgun or the terrible shotgun, assuming that you're not using it in a dedicated sneak crit roll. If you're just sneaking around and using this, it's going to be in the broken tier, but I think if you're running around with this normally, I'd probably put it up into S tier, because it's not quite to that level of being overpowered, simply because you don't have the fast follow-up shots and you can't just clear out an entire room with one magazine before you need to reload. It's also a pretty cool weapon. I do really like double barrel showing up in games, so having a really powerful side-by-side double barrel is really awesome. Yeah, these weapons are a little bit problematic in the game, mostly just because of how shotguns work. If the shotgun crit multiplier wasn't like it is, these would still be very strong weapons. The combat shotgun would still probably be in A tier, and the double barrel and the terrible shotgun would still probably be in S tier. But with how they do work, these are all just bumped up that much more, so they're that much stronger. Yeah, tell me your thoughts on these weapons. These are really interesting weapons and incredibly powerful weapons. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.